KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger, a public affairs program featuring stories from all over the Central Valley with Sevag Tateosian, 90.7 KFSR.
I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Welcome to the Central Valley Ledger. We're recording out of the beautiful downtown Fresno studios of the Community Media Access Collaborative, Fresno Clovis. Our guest this week is the Executive Director of something called LAFCO. His name is David Fey. David, welcome to the program.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I got your last name right.
That's correct.
Because off camera, I was calling you the completely wrong last name. So it's David Fey.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about what LAFCO is.
LAFCO stands for the Local Agency Formation Commission. And it is an organization that there's one in every county, and it's essentially chartered by the legislature to oversee the boundaries of cities and special districts.
So, jurisdictions, let's say the city of Fresno, city of Clovis, county of Fresno, city of Parlier, are they all a part of LAFCO?
To some degree, yes. The commission, if I can explain the
Sure,
composition.
sure.
So the Local Agency Formation Commission. There is a commission in Fresno County. It is composed of 5 members. We have 2 members of the Board of Supervisors, and they are selected by the board chair. And then we have 2 members of city councils. Then they are selected by a city selection committee, and they're there to represent the interests of the cities, and the members of the board are there to represent the interests of the county. So you have the cities and the county, and then together those 4 members appoint a public member. So there's some balance there. So there's 5 members in Fresno County. The law allows special districts to be represented as well. In Fresno County, we don't have special district representation, but probably half of the 58 LAFCOs in the state have some level of special district representation.
So who chooses who's on the commission? Let's say that you have another jurisdiction that says, no, I want to be on the commission. How does that work?
So my question to you is, what is that jurisdiction? Is it a city? Is it a county?
City of Fowler.
Let's say City of Fowler. City of Fowler says, we want to be represented on LAFCO. So there's 2 ways of approaching that. The City Selection Committee can appoint somebody from the City of Fowler, or the City Selection Committee can remind this person from Fowler that the cities already have representation on the commission. So there's a couple of ways of handling that, but generally speaking, if an agency, a city, or a member of the Board of Supervisors wants to be represented physically, they can take their pitch to their respective bodies and ask to be put on LAFCO. But it's really up to the chair of the board to make the appointments for the county, and it's up to the City Selection Committee. There are 15 cities in the county, so you have 15 mayors or council members at that meeting, and they decide which 2 members will be selected to serve as full-time members of the commission.
What type of a person should be on the commission? I mean, what interests would I have, let's say, or what would make me a good candidate to be on the commission? Well,
you would be a member of the Board of Supervisors or a member of a city council in the county. You can also be you could run as the or campaign to be the public member. So you would approach the commission and say, I have an interest in LAFCO, I have an interest in boundaries in the work of the commission, and I'd like to serve as the public member. So there's a couple of ways of approaching it. One thing to remember is LAFCO is not it's not a commission where people are elected to it from a popular vote. It's not like a school district or city council. It's essentially a group of the cities and the county agree to settle their differences or make plans that concern each other on a higher level than simply an elected position. It's an appointed position. And that's consistent across California. They're all the members of the commission are either members of the board or city councils, or as I said, in some cases they're representing special districts.
Do you get people who completely don't know what you do? Because before I got involved in, not politics, but government, I had no idea what LAFCO was or that it even existed. Do you get people like that where they wonder, David, what is it that you do?
Most of my family members, when we meet at the holidays, they ask the pleasantries and ask about work, and I start into it, and they're like, "I got to put money in the meter," and they run off. We don't even have meters in my neighborhood, so I'm a little suspicious about that. But the work that I do, I've been in planning for over 30 years. I have been a city planner, worked for City of Fresno, City of Clovis. I've done a little work on the private side for some private planning companies. And where I am right now is really a step above what I used to do. For instance, generally speaking, land use planning involves meeting with people who are affected by change. They're either the agents of change or the developers, or they're people that own property that things are changed around it, or maybe there's a general plan that changes an area that's currently in rural residential or in agriculture. The city is growing out. So I'm used to dealing with people who basically tell me, "Dave, I moved out to the country to get away from the city, and now here you are planning for the city to grow around me." So part of what I've learned is to respect other people's opinions, respect their point of view, but also respect the point of view of my employer, who says change is coming. And I've been reasonably successful, and with the help of good people out there in the community, successful to help them see how this plan is not just a disruption of their life, but really an evolution of the area around them, because they moved into an area that was subdivided by a developer. Mm-hmm. If you've got a 5 or 2 acre rural residential property, you may think you own the American dream, but that American dream really was the product of mapping, of parcelization. Sometimes it was extending services that you enjoy, water or sewer. So the role that I'm playing at LAFCO is a bit higher level. I'm not dealing directly as an agency making change, because that's really up to the cities and the county. But we are administering the change that they've made.
So let's say you have a city, and I'm using just an example. City of Sanger says, "You know what? We want to grow." Mm-hmm. And if that growth means that we're going to kind of abut or go into more closer to the city of Fresno, mm-hmm. Can they do that?
It all depends. The commission makes a determination on boundary changes. So if that city, say the city of Sanger, here's their city limit, that's the corporate limit, that's where their taxing authority ends. Sometimes that's where their services ends. On the other side of that line is where the county has land use authority, county services are provided. If the city grows, it has to grow within what's called a sphere of influence. And the sphere of influence is a much larger boundary that is determined by the commission. So the city of Sanger, let's say, wants to grow. They need to grow first in accordance with their own general plan. Okay. Because if it's not in accordance with their general plan, then they need to change the plan. And plans change. They change sometimes on every 10 years, every 20 years with a new administration. So plans are somewhat flexible in that extent, because they reflect the needs of the community. You know, the dot-com boom changed how agencies, cities look at growth, because it's a different kind of growth than, say, the industrial growth that took place decades before, or the agricultural growth that took place even further. So a city has to have a plan that allows for growth. Then, if they want to annex territory consistent with that growth, it has to be within the sphere of influence. And the sphere, even though it's not round, the sphere of influence is essentially a boundary that the commission establishes outside of the city's growth about 20 years, 25 years in advance of growth.
Well, is it true that when a city grows, whether it be Sanger, Fowler, whoever, who loses the land? Is it the county that loses, or how does that work? I guess I might be thinking of it incorrectly, but I'm thinking of a piece of land, and then you have county jurisdiction, mm-hmm. and then you have the cities. And if the cities grow, someone has to lose land, or do they?
Not really, and you do. With all due respect, it is a misinterpretation that the county loses land, because the land is still in the county. The county's boundary hasn't changed, but that's a popularly held assumption. Sometimes
because I'm not alone in that.
You're not alone. No. That's all right. That's why I have a response ready for you, because I've said it before. But the county does lose, or has the potential to lose, tax revenue.
Okay.
And the county's always strapped for cash because of all the mandates that the state and feds put on counties. They are always taxed, or their resources are taxed. And so when the city adds land to its boundaries, when it annexes land, actually it takes an application to the LAFCO, and the LAFCO considers it and approves it or denies it. In some cases, when it approves it, there's also the need for an adjustment of the property tax, because the county says, we don't want to lose everything when this boundary moves. Because when the boundary moves, the county is no longer providing whatever services it provided.
Exactly.
Or many of the services it provides. Some
Sheriff services.
sheriff, juvenile justice, public health, courts, etc. So those are expenses that the county must still fund, even for people that live in a city. But let's say fire protection, sewer, water, drainage. There's a suite of services: street lighting, sidewalks, road repair. So the county is no longer obliged to provide those services. The city has to provide those services. So cities will say, well, we're providing the bulk of the services, so we should get the bulk of the taxes. And the county says, well, we still have to have these sort of background services that still require to be funded. So the cities and the counties agree on a tax sharing agreement. They have what's called a memorandum of understanding. As long as that's in place, the cities can grow, and when they grow, instead of all the taxes now going to the city, the property taxes, it's split a certain way according to the MOU between the city and the county. And that then allows the county to continue to function as optimally, and the city can now get that revenues for the services that it provides.
In trying to understand better what it is that you do, I think a question that I can ask that will get you to kind of expand on a little bit is, when do people get mad at you, or do they?
It all depends when they first meet me. You know, the experience that I've had in community planning and meeting people and understanding, I'm not just coming out there saying, hey, change is happening, you know, pack it up and move. Because they still have a voice in the process. They have a voice with the county and the Board of Supervisors. They have a future voice with the city that's annexing them. And so what I try to do is to explain, as I said earlier, explain the process so that they can exercise their voice within the parameters of what's going on. For people to show up and say, I don't like what you're doing and I moved out here to get away from you, and then they storm away thinking, okay, well, that's your opinion based on your experience, but did you know these other things? Many people are afraid that their lifestyle will change. They're still the owners of that property. Now, what frequently changes is that the view of the Sierras that they once enjoyed is now going to be blocked because something's going to be built between them. But when they think about the fact they don't own the air rights, they don't own that property, they've just been enjoying essentially for free this view. And when that property owner who says, I have rights too, I want to develop my property, here's the plan, it calls for this land use, I want to build this land use, and it's lawful and orderly. So it's really a matter, I don't want to say boiling the frog, that's kind of a terminal sort of example, but it's a matter of slowly getting people to realize that there is a process, it has always been in place, and this process is moving through, and it moves through in waves. They need to know that and really identify that, and then they'll decide, okay, do I want to protest and still say no, or do I see some advantage in it for me? Hey, my property used to flood, but this developer is going to be putting in drainage, and so my property won't flood, or it won't be as bad as I thought because now I have neighbors that I like, as opposed to the guy with the junk cars in his yard, you know, who sold the property. So I'm initially seen as an agent of change, and I accept that role, and I don't take it personally because I've had a lot of what I call success stories of people that may not like what I represent, but I've shown them the respect, and I've shown them how to interact in this larger process, this planning process, and I think they come to respect the work that I was doing there. So I think I've probably made more friends than enemies, but in the beginning there's always this a defensiveness that folks often put up towards planners, LAFCO, staff, and I recognize that as part of the job.
Without mentioning which jurisdictions, has there ever been a time where you can get two cities kind of warring or war with each other or angry at each other?
Yes.
And what would lead to that situation?
Well, I won't make any pronouncements of which cities they are, But I've been at LAFCO 4 years. I've been the executive officer 4 years, and when I started, there were some headbutting between cities that were adjacent to each other.
Which is, and I want to stop you, I don't want to take your train of thought out, but it's understandable as some cities grow and stuff like that happens. It's understandable for two parties and two cities to be kind of angry at each other. So I don't mean the question in a negative way, but I think it helps kind of people understand what LAFCO does better.
Oh, exactly. And it really boils down to, if my experience in community planning is one-on-one. Let's say you get a notice in the mail, change is coming, I'm going to protest this, but we end up meeting and talking. I don't want to have a group of people, I'd rather have about 5 or 6. And we can talk about it, and we won't have one person dominating the conversation and yelling and keeping you from learning, keeping you from asking me questions, and vice versa. So we've met, and now you know your role in the planning process. Okay, that's one-on-one. That's what I enjoy about this job. And in a way, it's a challenge, but it's also an obligation on my part to help shepherd people through this process. All right, so let's say we were 2 city managers, and your council's on your case. You better show that other city over there, you better show them a thing or two, and maybe you kick sand in my face back in 3rd grade. And I haven't forgotten that, because this is a small town. And my council's on my case to show your city a thing or two. So frequently, the problems between any agencies, cities, counties, cities and special districts, it boils down to personalities. There are facts that we deal with. And those facts are that when the commission established this sphere of influence, that's the growth for this agency. And if that agency is the city of X, the commission has spoken. This is the growth area of that city. If the city of Y is over here and said, we wanted that territory, then it needs to take that beef to the commission. But it frequently sees the commission as, well, I'm not going to be able to change their minds. I'm just going to protest every annexation, every project that this other city has. And so it really boils down to a personality conflict, frequently, not always, but that's one of the things I deal with. You know, politics is personal, and you might have the parties opposing each other, or great cities opposing each other, or working towards opposite goals. But if you start peeling back the layers, you realize it's 2 people, and sometimes it takes retirement for that problem to go away. When those 2 people retire and they're replaced, the replacements are saying, why are we fighting? You've got yours, I've got ours, and if we have a gray area, let's talk about it. And so to me, that's the gist of success, is when people sit down and talk, when leaders who are either elected or appointed to lead and function in that way as statesmen and stateswomen, that's really their job. And sometimes they just need to be reminded of that.
So on any given hearing or any given LAFCO meeting, what is on the agenda?
That's a good question, because in a way they're all different. They're all the same. You know, we have a consent calendar, which are routine things. It's the minutes from the last meeting and maybe some non-controversial items. LAFCO's bread and butter up until about 2000 was annexations and spheres of influence. So you'll notice in the name, Local Agency Formation Commission, you might say, well, what's being formed? Where's the formation? I see annexations. Well, that's not a formation. A formation is when a special district is created from scratch, or when a city is created from scratch. So when a city is created, it's called an incorporation. When a special district, we really haven't talked about that much, but that's a lot of what we do.
Yeah, we'll get to that next.
When a special district is created, it's called a formation. And when LAFCOs were originally formed back in 1963, it was because cities and counties were running neck and neck in development. You know, you think about the Fresno metropolitan area and all the county islands we have. We've got Fig Garden, Sunnyside, Mayfair, on and on and on. Those are there because in the post-World War II era, the city could approve property, approve development, and it would extend its boundaries, and it would extend services, and the county could do the same thing. But the county wasn't extending services necessarily. They were just creating special districts for water, sometimes for sewer. Sometimes developments were approved with septic systems in every backyard, but they were hooked up to a community water system.
So that's where so special districts can be a matter of any really different topics. They don't have to be just septic, right? What are some examples?
Well, special districts are are local government at probably the most local and responsive level. That doesn't make them the most efficient because, again, it gets down to personalities too and the competency of the board, the competency of the staff. But special districts are formed to provide a governmental function, providing drinking water, providing wastewater collection and treatment. It could be a police protection district, a fire protection district. It could be a hospital district to provide for hospital services. In fact, just today we had our monthly hearing and we were reviewing cemetery districts. So we have about 20 species of special district in this county. Mm-hmm. There's about 3,000 statewide.
Wow.
There's more than that nationwide.
Who by the way, and I don't mean to keep cutting you off,
no,
but
that's all right.
Who pays for these special districts?
Well, many times they are paid through property taxes.
Of the properties?
Of the properties in the district.
In the district.
Now, Prop 13 changed that. In the old days, when a special district was formed, they were asked, as part of their formation, well, what are you going to need in terms of a property tax assessment to provide your services, to keep the doors open, to have people staffed, et cetera. And they'd say, well, we probably need about 0.001% of property value. So they would just add that. Well, Prop 13 changed that. It froze the property values, and now all the existing special districts have, in some cases, they've, the Auditor Controller's Office shaves that penny, and you get this, and you get this. And so there's a very small amount of property tax, I shouldn't say small. Generally speaking, the property tax for most special districts is a portion of what they were getting before Prop 13. Any additional funding that they need, they have to get through the fees they charge customers, which isn't a property tax, or there's a special assessment that has to be agreed to by the voters in that district. So some of our special districts are having some difficulty with keeping their expenses because people expect a certain level of service, and as costs increase, sometimes it goes past what it costs to provide, and there's a gap there that the Commission pays attention to. Now, the Commission doesn't run these special districts. We don't manage them. We don't have any land use authority. What the what the LAFCO does have is the control on the boundaries.
Okay.
So when that district wants to grow, it has to come to the Commission. No other agency in the state can change those boundaries. That's a responsibility that the legislature has delegated to LAFCOs. Now, we don't have any control over the boundaries or the operation of school districts or community college districts, but any special district or city in the county is under LAFCO's jurisdiction.
So before I go out and buy a house, should I ask the question, is this house in a special district? I mean, I don't want our audience members to be kind of like wondering everywhere they go they should ask the question, because, in the cities, do we see special districts?
You do.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So should we be wondering, if I'm going to go buy a house, should I ask that question? Hey, is this a special district? Or do you think that's a question that, shouldn't be asked?
I think it's a great question. And if you go to your property tax bill, you'll see all the special districts that you're currently, that your territory, your land lies within. So there'll be, do you have to interrupt? Oh, I thought you had another question for me. I was ready for it, too.
I did.
Okay.
Go ahead. You were on a roll.
So let's say, for instance, in my neck of the woods, I live up in North Fresno, so I'll have the Fresno Metropolitan Flood Control District. I'll have I believe it's Consolidated Mosquito Abatement District. There may be other there may be like a school bond that's been passed that's paid for out of my property tax. But in the Fresno metropolitan area, we have county service areas, we've got community service districts, we have police and fire protection districts.
Wow, that's a lot of districts that are formed out there.
Right, right.
So what's a given day like for you?
A given day? Well, I come to work and I've got a great staff. They're all younger than me, so they're bright and early in the morning. They don't have to wait for their third cup of coffee. But it starts out with routine work. There may be some administrative work. LAFCO is an independent agency, so we are not a county department. We're not a city department. And aside from my funding, which comes from the cities and the county, it's basically run like a private organization, a private company. I have my own bookkeeper, my own payroll. We have just contracted out for some additional HR work. So there may be some administrative responsibilities I have to take care of during the day. I answer the phone and I'm guaranteed there's going to be special district out there, and I usually work with the special districts more than I do with the public or the development community, but they're asking a question maybe like you'd ask. We want to grow. How do we do it? What's the process? I was approached by a couple of different organizations a few years ago that wanted to start a Veterans Memorial District.
Oh, okay.
And that's we have two of those in the county. We've got Clovis and Riverdale Veterans Memorial District. And these other parties were asking about Veterans Memorial Districts in their community. So I would go through basically the administrative part of it, which is, well, these are the forms that I need, and this is the information I'm going to need, and by the way, you need to have a plan, you need to have a financial statement. And so much of the time, it's almost like a daily contest of 20 questions as folks try to get an understanding about how they'd like to start things up.
And on that note, excellent way to end the interview. We're out of time, believe it or not. We could have talked about a ton of other things. I could have asked you about an hour worth of questions.
And I would have an hour's worth of answers.
Thank you so much for coming on the program.
My pleasure.
That's all for this edition of the Central Valley Ledger. Thank you to the volunteer crew that made this production and every production possible. They're in the studio now making us look and sound good. Thank you to our guest, David Fey, the Executive Director of LAFCO. Thank you for coming again.
My pleasure.
Thank you to those who are watching this broadcast on Comcast 93 and AT&T 99, and to those listening to this on 90.7 FM KFSR Fresno. We hope you enjoyed the program this week. Tune in next week to a new edition.
KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger every Sunday morning at 11:30. For a complete program schedule, visit kfsr.org.